if you want to change a cell in a petri dish, you change the culture that it resides in, and suddenly the cell takes shape to its environment. That's a human.
Your work has just been deeply impactful. Just the last time I talked with you, I really stepped up my game, my hanging game.
Cool.
And so at least every other day, got to pull up in the backyard, pull up bar. I'll go and hang there, do 20 to 30 second reps, couple sets,
Right.
and just hang out.
That's it.
Sans wang out. And, it's just very simple principles, but you walk the talk and you've impacted so many people, including many of our friends and colleagues. And that's very noticeable, even in all the recommendations, endorsements that are in your book with some absolute superstars, because you're one of them. And I want to kick things off because I think that we have this concept in our reality that we are shaping our own bodies. Like, it's my job to shape my body.
Yep.
And that is partly true. But we are negating what is possibly the largest shaper of our bodies, which is our environment.
Yeah.
So can you talk about how our environment actually shapes our body?
Yeah, of course. Firstly, on the way here, I'm so immensely grateful to get to share any time with you. But I've told you before, but literally I think 8 years ago, I started listening to your podcast, and I was scrupulously maniacally taking notes on all the different little details and exercise recommendations and nutritional stuff and all that stuff. And you were the primary catalyst and inspiration for me to start my own podcast and kind of get into my own foray into the social media world and all that stuff. So to be in this moment with you, now it's starting to feel more common, which I'm so grateful for that. And harking back to God dang. So the moment, the thing I was reflecting on is, it's so interesting how many of the yous of the past are listening to this and the me's of the past are listening to this right now. I know that person is right now there going through the same motions and the same aspirations and all that. And it's just such a wild thing how life works that way.
It is, man. It's so powerful.
And then, so within that, you were a part of my environment, my environmental conditions. So you were my audio environment.
That's remarkable. That's really powerful.
And so the way that so there's a lot of different layers we could go with that. We're impacting ourselves and each other from an auditory perspective, based off of the tones that we're projecting, the pacing of our language. There's a researcher from the 60s, professor from UCLA called Albert Morabian, came up with a thing called the 55-38-7 principle. 55% of our communication comes from body language, 38 is voice tonality, and then 7 is the words that we speak. And that relates to if there's any incongruence between that. So if we're having a conversation and suddenly my voice starts getting really high or getting really fast, or maybe my eyes start looking away from you, or my shoulders kind of start cowering forward, or my hips go to the door, whatever I'm saying, you're gathering, millions and billions of bits of information from your visual field and from your auditory field. Yeah. And then there's the words that kind of piggyback on top of that. So as we're communicating to each other, that's really the bulk of the communication comes from actually our movement. And then more specifically in relation to the environment and the way that I think you meant it in the question, you've had Bruce Lipton on here, which he's such a sweetie. I got to go up to his place and we spent the day together and, record another episode on mine, and just such an amazing person to be around. One of the things that he brought up in the conversation was that, if you want to change a cell in a petri dish, you change the culture that it resides in. Yeah. So if you want to create some type of chemical change or structural change or whatever it may be, you don't go in and titrate chemicals on the cell or do some kind of thing with little tweezers or something. You go and you change the constitution that it exists in, and suddenly the cell takes shape to its environment. That's a human.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you come home, your home is a gymnasium. It's an opportunity for wellness. It's an opportunity for creativity. It's an opportunity for inspiration. It's an opportunity for natural light. It's an opportunity for whatever you want it to be. There's no right or wrong. It's just defining what it is that you actually, what do you want? Define your goals, and then reverse engineer from there. So for me, one of the things that I find to be valuable is, adaptability and longevity and strength and flexibility and joy, and so creativity, so within that, coming into a home environment, something that we can do, like a really obvious one, but just what you did is like, set up a pull-up bar. So now suddenly you change the shape of your doorway. Before it was just a doorway. The only function of that doorway is you walk through the doorway. Now suddenly there's a pull-up bar there, and it's like your arms are lifted up to the bar. It's almost like this effortless, it's just like, it just happened. That was fitness. Fitness just happened just by you changing the shape of your environment that you exist in. So, okay, could we do that in other ways? Okay, so before we come home, all there is dinner table, coffee table, you may put your feet on, couch, TV, that's all we have space for, that's what we do. So we sit 90 degrees on the dinner table, and then we go to the couch, and then into the bed, and the toilet, and then our office, and then our car, and then a train, and then every position is in that same archetypal kind of like hunched over position. Mm-hmm. Opportunity would be maybe put, some floor cushions down on the ground, and create enough space that when you come back, it's like inviting for you to get all the way down to the ground and get all the way back up. Suddenly you're mobilizing your ankles and your knees and your hips and your pelvic floor muscles and your diaphragm. You're helping circulate lymphatic fluid, which needs muscular contraction in order to move. And so I think it's just an interesting opportunity or question to ask, like, what is the shape of my environment? If I were to kind of audit my space, what would be the postural potentials from this space? And come through, and it's like, okay, like, can I tweak that? And then do I want to tweak that? Because it's all just opportunities. There's no good, bad. It's just, what do you want?
Yeah. I think that's a great idea switch, because what we tend to see is, sitting in a chair bad when it's just a way to be. Mm-hmm. But that chair sitting, from the chair in your house to the chair in your car to the toilet chair, all the chairs you mentioned, the chair in the office, it is putting your body, the environment is having your body in this pretty consistent position that's then going to make you very efficient at chair sitting.
Yep.
And maybe take away efficiency from other things. Right? So not putting it bad, but like, let's see it as an opportunity to be creative. This is a version of sitting that we can do. Let's dabble in, or we said before the show started, we'll dabble in, sprinkle in a little bit of some other stuff. And I love, man, I didn't know that you was going to mention that first, that the auditory environment, because then my mind, sometimes I get that Neo Matrix type thing. And I was just seeing, as everybody's listening right now, and these vibrations leaving my body and entering your ear and interacting with those tiny little bones and helping to create these electrical signals in your brain. Literally, it's shaping your brain. It's changing the very shape of your brain, even at the most minute level, but that expands as you repeat a certain behavior of your auditory environment. And so, like you said, like, I became a part of your life prior to even knowing you, and that environment, that shaping of your perspective, it brought you closer, into this universe now where you're here with me, and we cannot overlook how powerful it is of what we're allowing into our environment or inviting into our environment. And we get to choose that. But oftentimes we're not aware of it. And that's part of what we do, is we're getting folks to be aware of how powerful we are and how many options we actually have, because it's pretty infinite.
It's interesting. When you listen to someone, you're familiar with Stephen Porges and polyvagal theory, I'd imagine. He one of the things in his theory that he's brought to the table is a term known as neuroception. And neuroception is, as we're moving through the world, we receive various different visual and auditory feedbacks that indicate to our nervous system whether we're safe or not. And so there's a lot of sounds that you may hear. Maybe you meet a dog and the dog's like freaks out. It doesn't trust that something about you. Maybe it's that you have a beard. Maybe it's that you're big. Maybe it's that your voice is high. Maybe it's that it's low. It triggers some past memory that was like, ooh, threat. But we have these consistent auditory cues that indicate to our nervous system via millennia of evolution, depending upon your belief systems, obviously, it's since the beginning of humanity, and probably before human, there's certain sounds that indicate safety, like a soothing crackling of a fire, or maybe it's like ocean, maybe a dog snoring, maybe your partner you hear your partner breathing, and all of those, they're tuning your autonomic nervous system on a momentary basis. And so as we're communicating to each other, once again, the way that we communicate, that 38% of that voice tonality, there is a specific imprint or signature in the tone of your voice. And when you speak to someone, especially in maybe a psychological circumstance, maybe you're like seeing a therapist or something of the sort, there's your words. But when you start to get into territory that makes you kind of be like, whoop, we're in deeper waters here, your voice might start to kind of crack, or might start to get a little bit high for a second, all of those are indications that you're starting to tread into waters that your autonomic nervous system, your deeper mammalian brain, it's saying, oh, don't know how to process this. Aha, we've arrived. Now, how do we respectfully navigate this space? And so that's the really beautiful thing. If you're a sensitive person, which we all are, or else you just wouldn't be around. If you've made it to this point, just in human evolution as a whole, and then as an individual, you're still here, you're a sensitive person. If you're successful in business, if you have, halfway decent relationships, if you're somewhat healthy in your mind and body, you're a sensitive person. You're picking up these cues continually. Yeah. And, it's just magical when you start to take a moment and kind of think of that imprint or that signature, that fingerprint in the tone of someone's voice, and then start to pay attention to your own tone. So when you're speaking to someone, I think that this is, 70% of the nerve fibers of the vagus nerve, very popular nerve as of recent. It's kind of like the iliopsoas muscle, and kind of like have its moment of limelight. But 70% of the fibers in that are afferent, meaning they're feeding information from the body up to the brain. And so you're receiving this immense amount of information from your body all the time. And so if we allow the spaciousness to actually listen in and say, how does my body feel right now? When I'm speaking to that person, do I feel really safe? Do I feel like a clenching in my stomach? Do I feel maybe trapped? Do I feel expansive? Do I feel, confident? How's my voice? All of those are really beautiful tools to be able to check in and say, okay, am I placing myself in an environmental condition that's conducive for my growth? And then from there, the next thing is saying, okay, interesting. This is a two-way relationship. I can observe my physiological expressions, and those are translations into they have mental emotional translations. And then if I want to change my state, I can say, okay, I'm going to, go in and I'm going to change the tone of my voice. I'm going to change the pacing, maybe the way that I breathe. I'm going to do a long exhalation. Maybe I'll do a long exhalation and a sigh. Maybe I'll relax my eyes and take in that panoramic view, which that's tied into the autonomic nervous system as well, to calm your nervous system down. Maybe I'll pull my shoulders back. Maybe I'll take a little walk, and start to get that gait pattern, swing my shoulders, open up through my diaphragm and my lungs and my hips. Oh my God, suddenly I feel better. Just 6 breaths. There was a study from, I believe it was in Japan. They found that just 6 breaths, you could change your blood pressure in an instant. And so it's we can have such immediate effect on this physical experience, and we're just covered in all of these amazing levers that we can pull on at any time. We just I don't know if it's summary. I think it's because our teachers didn't really understand the levers because they never got the education. But we didn't receive that education on how to drive the body effectively and how to pull on these levers. How do I wake up? How do I go to sleep? How do I relax? How do I focus? Tapping into your senses and your postural patterns are all opportunities to do that.
Yeah. These for me are some of the most important things. These are the things that it's like the soil from which everything else comes from, so it's kind of tragic that has been lacking in our education. However, again, it's just presenting another opportunity. And, you know, when you mentioned Bruce Lipton, that ties in so well with all of this. And even walking, for example, like that's a vibrational pattern. When that action, the activity of walking is creating a certain vibrational pattern in the body that's influencing every single cell in the body. Even if we go to the level of our atoms, they're just vibrating at this ridiculously fast pace. And we look very solid. Even right now, you look still,
Right.
but everything in you is vibrating like crazy, you know, like some Doctor Strange level multiverse of madness, you know what I mean? Yeah. And, you know, I remember Bruce Lipton talking about how even our cells doing function, it's really a result of a vibrational input, a signal, right? There's a signal being broadcast, a certain vibration. And one of my all-time favorite episodes of the Model Health Show, and, you know, I've done hundreds of interviews, and also me doing media and all these other shows, probably knocking on the door of 1,000 media pieces. And of all of that, for me personally, one of the most interesting and places that I learned the most from was from a conversation with Dr. Coleridge Chaudhry, and she has a book called Sound Medicine.
Cool.
And she just brought to light something that's been just, you know how you got these things just kind of rattling around in your brain like loose change, and then like suddenly you get the arcade game to put the change in. It's like, oh, okay, I get it. And she related all of the ways that sound is already used in medicine that we just take for granted. Even the name ultrasound, we're just like, whatever. But it's literally a tool that can be used, of course, for imaging, but also as therapy, because it is literally using sound to change conditions in your body. And it's so subtle, it's so out of our pitch range as far as our human ears, that it's actually unbelievable that it's even a thing. And this gets into the conversation about we only experience or notice a certain spectrum of things with our human eyes and ears, you know, and there's so much, literally, again, from both directions, from ultrasound all the way to sonic, whatever, you know, and we operate in a tiny medium, but everything else is affecting us. And we have the opportunity to proactively expose ourselves to other things, even if we don't understand it, or to avoid those things, you know. And so this is another message of yours, is that message of empowerment. And I wanted to ask you about this because what we're talking about is an expression of the body, right? And I'm wondering if our physical expression, when you see somebody, can our physical expression of our body, how we're standing, how we're moving, can that inform you about our state of physical health?
Yeah, of course. Well, so that's such a cool road to go down. I mean, you can hear, staying just for a second on the auditory spectrum, you can hear a healthy person, right? If someone's or kung, 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 kung around a house, what is that? You know, that's like a cacophonous, you know, it's like a cacophonous, struggling biological system. And a more effortless system that things just seem to work. You don't notice it, right? So if there's something in your system that you notice, it's probably because it could use some work. You know, so your breathing, ideally, it should be, you know, so light that you can't even feel the breath going in and out through the nostrils. Like it's you want the hairs inside of the nostrils wouldn't even move through the breath. And so it's, if you can breathe in that way, it's an indication that your hemoglobin cells, your red blood cells, they are efficient enough to be able to release their binding affinity to oxygen, and they efficiently release oxygen into your bloodstream to allow your muscles to function. If you're a person that's more habituated to taking these big gasps of air throughout the day, and you're just dumping this buffet of air down your throat all the time, then your cells get super lazy and they become kind of like slobbish and wasteful with the way that they the way that they release oxygen into the bloodstream. So a person that's really healthy, and just from a breathing perspective, it'd be kind of almost like they're like it's like a Jedi. They're like a samurai, and they're kind of just like a healthy person just glides through the room. And I think that's from a physical communication or body language perspective. I think it's so interesting. Riding back on that, a person, if you are projecting wholeness or integration in the body, it sends a signal to other people that you would be tough prey, right? You would be tough to attack. You'd be tough to take advantage of. You'd be tough to exploit. So there's so many people that I think that they maybe, I fall into this category, and it's something that I kind of have like a trigger. I wig out a bit when I have a sensation of someone that's victimizing themselves or kind of like playing the victim role. And so I've noticed that throughout myself for years, which is why it's such like a trigger for me whenever I see it out in the world. I'm like, don't do that. And there was some research that was actually done with this, where the researchers, they went into a prison, and they gathered up a bunch of inmates that were in there for violent crimes, and they gave them a bunch of videos of people just walking down the street, different sexes, different colors, different weights, sizes, ages, all of that. And what they found, I include this in the Align Method book, what they found was the people that would not be prey, they wouldn't make an effort at robbing the person, were the people that moved with this integration of this wholeness in the way that they moved. It wasn't because they were bigger, it wasn't because they were blacker, or because they were whiter, or because they were Asianer, or any of that. It was if they felt like they had this directionality and this smoothness and this integration with the way that they moved, then they wouldn't be an easy target. And so even as you're moving down, you're walking down the street, you're sending this information out into the visual world, and all of those people that are either passively or actively observing your experience, the way that you're ambulating down the street, you're either holding up a sign saying, come and get it, or you're holding up a sign and saying, not me. And so how do we start to tap into that? We don't tap into that by, in this moment, okay, pull the shoulders back, puff the chest up, like, cool, I got it. No, you tap into that by changing your environmental conditions. You tap into that. The best time to plant a tree is yesterday. The second best time is right now. Is that how they say that?
Maybe 10 years ago.
Whatever, 10 years ago. Yeah, 10 years ago. Right.
Now,
yeah, the second best time is right now. And so with that, it's like changing your environmental conditions, expose yourself to ample sunlight, get enough vitamin D, get enough fat soluble vitamins. A, D, K2 specifically are very important for like bone growth and hormonal function, and, exposing yourself to cold temperatures, exposing yourself to warm temperatures, all the stuff, like listen to Model Health Show, tap into 1/10 of what you discuss, like actually integrate that into your daily life. And it needs to be a daily habit. It's if you are, someone that's like an overnight success, but it took them 20 years to become an overnight success, that's the way it works. So if we can seamlessly start to integrate these practices into our daily lives, and one of the things that's very simple, it's like, okay, cool, that's very like meta, abstract, borderline like inspirational kind of jargon. Actionably, how do we do that? Well, a person that has mobile ankles and mobile hips and, a good balance of body fat and to muscle, hip to waist ratios, all that stuff. The way that we do that is, a really simple thing would be just, at least from the mobility perspective, would be, like we mentioned before, just spend some time on the ground each day. Like 30 minutes in total. If you're just checking your emails while you're sitting in a straddle position or a cross-legged position or a 90-90 position, your hips are up above the height of your knees while you're in that position. So you're starting to stabilize the lower back, and orient the pelvis, sacrum, spine in such a way that they're strong. You're kind of reintegrating back into those native patterns that you had as a child. Like any baby moves pretty darn well because they don't have enough muscle to kind of like cheat through gravity. They're just finding that balance and that orientation. And when you see a person move that way, it's almost surprising. Like when you see a person move with lightness and like levity, Charles Bukowski, he has a bit where he talks about a free soul. A free soul doesn't have any particular like shape or, any specific indications, but when you're around a free soul, you feel good. You feel really good. It's like that free soul, that part. I think that comes from, a lifetime or a month or a year, of lifestyle decisions that now suddenly present into this moment. Yeah. And you're telling this story based off of every bit of information that you've engaged with over the last month, year, decade. And then life starts to open up for you in a different way. You're like, oh, what is it? Is it because I'm negging, or doing some kind of like dating hack thing? I read the game, it's like, no. Like we're picking up on a lifetime of information from each other. Yeah. So the ways that we can do that, I think, again, it just comes back to start to change up the environment and suddenly, and change up your mindset and make these subtle little shifts in your life, which was the whole intention and function of writing the Align Method, was to create a fundamental user's manual, like a field manual for how do we inhabit our bodies the most effective way possible in daily life, as opposed to it being something that I sit in my car, I drive to a gym, and I engage in fitness for 45 minutes. It's like, how do we make it so that fitness is who I am? Mm-hmm. I identify as an athlete. Right? If you're a person with a body and you walk, you put your arms up over your head every now and again, you communicate, like I would say you're an athlete, And so if you can start to identify with those things and start to integrate that into our lives, I think it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah. Wow. That's remarkable. This, not only does this answer the question of whether or not our body can display our state of health, but this leads into another part of the conversation, which is not only are we broadcasting our physical state of health, but we're also broadcasting our state of mental health as well. So can you dig into that a little bit? How is our posture or our state of physical, just how we're showing up in the world, demonstrating and communicating to the world our state of mental health?
Yeah. Well, so there's a lot of interesting stuff with that. So coming back into the concept that your body is covered in these levers that we can pull on to make us, to induce certain states. Your facial postures, for example, your facial gestures. It's called the facial, what do they call it? Facial gesture hypothesis, I believe is the term for it. But each gesture that you make with your face, Paul Ekman is a researcher that has gone very deep on this. I actually did a podcast with him, a couple years ago. I think he's like the top 10 most cited psychologists on the planet. Old guy, really sweet. But he traveled to Papua New Guinea and various different locations to spend time with tribes that had been untouched to any type of, other populations or industrialized culture. And to see if their facial expressions, their facial postures, were consistent with the rest of the world. Then he came up with 10,000 specific facial gestures, all with specific translations, and all with specific meanings. And so when we're communicating with each other, if I am happy, every face across the planet is happy pretty much the same way, right? So if you are faking a smile, for example, then you'll just kind of do this smile with just your mouth, and it's kind of like creepy, it's like serial killer kind of vibe. So if you
Dexter,
yeah, exactly. So if a true smile is called the Duchenne Smile from an old anatomist, that you would be smiling with your mouth and your eyes. So you're activating those orbicularis oculi muscles in and around the eye that cause the eyes to kind of squint. That's that's like a true indication that the person is, feels that way, feels happy. If you win a race, everyone wins a race the same way. If you lose a race, everybody loses a race the same way. And then there's like gang signs and like West Side and this and that, obviously those are learned, but those deep inherent postural patterns and facial gestures. They are it's like a binding, unifying factor with every human being on the planet. And so we can tap into that, and all of those facial gestures, they're tied back into the cranial nerves. So there's 12 cranial nerves. Vagus is a part of theirs. It's a part of that system, and those are all tied into our autonomic state. So if you change the tonicity of the muscles in and around the neck, the masseter, of the eyes, the diaphragm, any of that, then those are all feeding back into your autonomic state. So if you want to, and there's been lots of research around this as well, you've probably heard of like the pencil study, where they put a pencil in people's teeth, and that caused, there's a pencil in your teeth that forces that smile happening. And so when they would show them movies and things of the sort, they'd find things to be more humorous and funny, and it would induce this sensation of lightheartedness when you're like that. When you put they did it with a golf tee, they put a golf tee in people's brow, and then it would force a frown, like a resting bitch face, and suddenly they perceive the world as being a little bit more closed off. So it's pretty darn interesting. Yeah. And once again, this taps into, okay, cool. So there's this imprint, this specific fingerprint of every person's tone of voice. That's just so cool if you really sink into that and you start listening. And start paying attention to how does, if you're at a bus station, how does it make you feel? If you're in an airport, how does that make you feel? If you're out in nature, how does that make you feel? We also have an imprint in every one of our postural patterns and every one of our facial expressions. If you meet a person and they're chronically kind of like frowning, it makes you feel away, because the reason that humans, one of the primary factors that makes humans so effective as a species is our capacity for communication. The way that we communicate is through attunement. If I can take on your shape, then you trust me more, because you don't trust anyone more than yourself. Right? It's like tribalism 101.
Yeah.
I come in, cool, like, you like Pittsburgh Steelers? Cool, I just happen to wear my Steelers jersey today. You have resting bitch face? Cool, kind of, yeah, I don't like the world either. So like, there's something about that person. I don't know what it is exactly. But I like that person. That's what we're always doing. So in NLP world, neuro-linguistic programming, that's like one of the foundational principles of it. Coming in and having that like a mirroring of each other. And if you are once again, if you're alive and you're doing halfway decent in your life, then you are effective at all of these practices. So you can go under the hood and say, oh yeah, I do that sometimes, or I could do that a little bit better. Maybe I'm a little spectrumy. It's like, I'm not really that good at being able, when someone makes a facial gesture, I don't read it that well, and I certainly don't embody that myself and respond back for them to feel comfortable. So if you can have, when we say flexibility, and this is what with the line method stuff, it's like, this is where I'm really interested in the conversation around fitness. I think we think of fitness as this compartmentalized thing that we do inside of a box. Fitness is every aspect of your biology. Like, you are movement. So the reason that you have a brain is to move through the world. Talking, movement. Thinking, movement. Cardiovascular function, lymphatic function, like every aspect of you is a form of movement. So I think we've been sold largely in Western culture the idea that there is a pill out there that will solve your woes. So cool. That's like the anti-movement conversation. Technically, you move yourself to reach out to put the pill into your face. But we've moved ourselves in to our present physiological, mental, emotional, lifestyle state. So therefore, there's probably a way to move ourselves into wherever the heck it is that we want to go, or unwind it through movement. Like, there's always a movement conversation in that. And the conversation around fitness, like facial flexibility, is fitness. Postural flexibility, to be say a dancer, maybe you train like improvisation. If you're good at improv, then you're probably not just like maybe military, upright, stacked, strong, stiff, like take orders guy. That's one persona. That's one face. You know, the initial meaning of persona comes from Greek theater. It was those conical masks that people would wear. You actually, I think you included these in your mask video.
That's correct.
You know, so that persona, actually, the original meaning from that is a mask that we wear in order to project an identity. So, stick up the ass, you know, upright position, like that's a persona. Then there's also maybe like lazy persona, you know, then there's also maybe creative persona, flamboyant persona. All of those, that's in order to be able to oscillate throughout those, pick the spectrum, pick the colors that you would like to engage with. That's flexibility. That's fitness. Dumbbell curls, great. Just one of the forms of fitness.
You know, just this idea. Well, so first of all, I've got to just backtrack just a little bit here, because you said something really profound, and I don't want to miss it, when you talked about all these different facets of movement indicating life, right? And life really, this is Bruce Lipton as well, was the first person to really articulate this for me, is that life is movement. And when life ceases is when movement ceases.
Yep.
And you said that we moved ourselves into this state that we're in, where we're probably a bit deficient, to put it nicely, in our variety of movement and patterns that we can be in. We chose to move in that way, whether we realize it or not.
Or
we
didn't make an active choice to choose to move another way.
And this still opens the door for our empowerment, because we chose that, even if it was unconscious, and we can choose other.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't know if you're doing this, but you continue to meld in an opportunity of empowerment for all of this stuff, you know, because it can really seem very dire. I know I've spent some time in the last 2 years in some of the data that I've been uncovering, and I've had that squinty face, you know, as I'm staring at this data, just like, and my wife will point out, like, you look pissed off, man, you know. And it's just like, it's a pattern. And this is the point I wanted to make, is this is a part of human evolution. Like, you don't got to teach a baby how to smile.
Yeah.
The baby knows. When the baby's happy and joyous, like, it's just there. That pattern is integrated into our evolution and our nervous system and our muscles. The same thing with being really upset and angry or fearful. We can learn patterns, of course, as we go and as we grow, as our brains develop and pick up more things from our environment. But a lot of this is already deeply ingrained. So this is what you were alluding to. When just putting the pencil in the mouth and you're getting into that state, your brain has that neural association is there. Just like, it's kind of smiling. So you're already just leaning towards seeing things in a more jubilant light.
Yeah, you're changing your filter. Yeah.
This is really remarkable stuff. So with that said, this really opens the door for our opportunity to have a shift in our perception, in our mindset, that can then change the outpicturing of our body.
Correct.
So let's talk a little bit about that. How can a change in our mind change the expression of our bodies?
Yeah, like mind body those are just words. Like, the body doesn't know the difference between bicep brachialis or triceps or sternocleidomastoid, or, you know, it just knows unicity, wholeness, integration. You know, it doesn't know what a heart is, doesn't know what a lung is, doesn't know what a liver is. It just knows that symphony, and knows the orchestra, and knows the unity of the whole system. You know, and so even the concept of mind body is like stories that we tell ourselves, because they're indivisible. You know, and so there's one of the things that you brought up that I think was interesting, is the way that the power that we have to augment the filter that we receive information is, I mean, it's just so cool. Like, there's research from San Francisco State University, particularly around this, and they had the researchers had groups of students go into slouched over postures, groups of students go into like upright posture, which, you know, there's like the really popular Amy Cuddy TED Talk and, you know, research that she's done around that, like the superwoman pose that potentially augments testosterone levels and cortisol. There's a lot of contention around it. But I think that if you draw back and you watch somebody walk into like a UFC ring, it's like there's something going on there. Somebody doesn't kind of like awkward. Like you can see if a person where their mind's at, and if they're gonna like pretty much win the fight, not 100% of the time, but pretty high percent of the time. When Jose Aldo and Conor McGregor, that fight, what was McGregor doing? His body was effortless. He was playing, right? His orchestra, there was no awareness of trumpet player, go, sax, piano. It was just, right? Jose was coming out and there was this tension. So if you're paying too much attention to what's happening here and you're trying to organize the parts, like you can't win. Like you have 640 odd muscles, 360 odd joints. Like there's so much complexity inside of this system. For you to be trying to organize that yourself is very challenging. And so that's kind of a tangent, but back to the San Francisco stuff. What they found were the people that were in a hunched over position. In the book, we call that the mopey postural archetype. We break down 5 different postural archetypes and their meanings. They would be in that hunched over kind of essentially the position that most of modern culture, if we are going from chair to chair to chair to chair to bed to chair to chair to chair to chair to bed, like that's your lifestyle. That's the position: forward head posture, medially rotated shoulders, hyperkyphotic spine, valgus knees. Like that's the anatomical description for collapse. What's another meaning for collapse? What is the literal translation of depression? Collapse, right? So when a person goes into that collapsed postural expression, they begin to distrust the things that they say. So when they would make certain statements, there was like this sensation of like, whether it was something that was accurate or inaccurate, I felt like I didn't really trust what I was saying. When they're in this stacked, well-oriented, confident, upright position, suddenly they reported to have greater trust of the words that they would communicate and the statements that they would communicate. They were also able to access memories, more like uplifting memories. So when you are in an upright posture, this comes back to NLP stuff again. You've anchored postural patterns to be to manifest during specific like mental emotional states. So you win the race. Always been the case. You hunted the woolly mammoth. You get to the top of the woolly mammoth. You bring it back, shoulders back, like you're not protecting your vital organs. You're not protecting your throat. I've won. There's a predator in the room. Contract, defend, right? I've lost. The woolly mammoth ate my wife. Complete deflation. Ate my family. Family's gone. Like finally.
I didn't even know woolies do that. The whole family.
So when we're in those positions, because I would say this is ancestral, and if it's not ancestral, then it's at least back to since you were a baby. When you are in this upright position, it's an indication that you've won. It means that you can now tap back in to that whole Rolodex, that whole index of good times. When I go, not a moralistic bad or good, there's no state that's better. It's just objectively, that's a reminder to your autonomic nervous system that, okay, cool. When have I lost? Okay, rolling back through that. So if I get to go through that postural position, so says research, and research obviously is going to be skewed because they probably are going into it with some level of intention with what they're creating, but just feel it in your own body. Like take every bit of research with a grain of salt. Just because someone did a study or there's a meta-analysis with a bunch of studies, all of those have an objective bias, and there's a ton of research that gets thrown in the trash because it doesn't prove what they were looking for. But just feel it. Like Conor McGregor, Jose Aldo, enough research.
Yeah, we've been like steered away from listening to our bodies and our gut and our intuition and all these. Again, even as we say those things, your body doesn't care. Your mind doesn't care. This is all that's actually happening. Correct. Is that perception? Is that, your body's kind of response to what's happening in the world around you. It's there. We can kind of numb it, but this leads into another thing I want to ask you about. Can what we eat affect the way that we move?
Yeah, of course. You know that. If you're eating something that's, if you're eating something that causes you to feel maybe stressed, for example, maybe you have too much coffee, like your body's going to wire yourself up to be in that agitated state. What's the musculoskeletal expression of agitation? Traps start getting tight. Start grinding my teeth, clenching my masseter. Maybe I'm like self-soothing because I'm trying to work some of this freaking energy out. So all of that, every bit of food that you put into your body, that's just information. Auditory information, visual information, nutritional information. So all of those are being processed, different processing systems, but same movement-based output. If I eat something that makes me feel sluggish, what do you do after Thanksgiving? I don't love that. My preference is to like keep on kind of keeping on with Thanksgiving times. But you eat some food that feels heavy, hard to break down, inflammatory. Suddenly your joints are inflamed. Yes, strong yes, affects the way that we're going to move. And it's such an interesting thing when you think of it from that lens. Like people, so I work with clients doing manual therapy largely, and also help them with training and various, essentially. Do you know Rolfing? Have we ever talked about Rolfing before? Structural integration, working with fascia and connective tissue and all that stuff. So the first thing that I would be thinking about with someone, it really varies depending upon the individual. But the first thing I'm thinking about typically is lifestyle stuff. A common question with most people that will come up within the first 5 minutes of talking it will be sleep patterns. So if you're not sleeping well, then good luck with everything else, and then coming into nutrition, and then coming into the shape of your environment, and then it's like I think oftentimes we get mired by the physical being like, okay, the knee thing is right there. It's contained within the knee. And within that, we have that tunnel vision on that. If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, but winding back into all of the different layers, each one's valuable. Nutrition is just one of the invaluable inputs.
Yeah. You mentioned sleep being involved here, and in the book, in this incredible addition where you've expanded the Align method, and as folks are listening to this, it's now available. Correct. And it's because I get it early, but it's at thealignbook.com, and you've got some bonuses there for folks as well once they pop over there and check it out.
Yeah.
But you share some insights on the aligned morning and the aligned evening.
Yep.
So let's talk about a possible, optimal or, up-leveling of our morning routine. Let's talk about the aligned morning. What does that look like?
Well, the first thing, I don't think it's going to be overly new for your audience, but the first thing would be exposing yourself to sunlight. Like first thing, get up, set the circadian rhythm, get that light, in the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Like you're consuming light through your eyes, and through, the rest of all the skin throughout your body as well. So the first thing would be setting the neurochemistry for the day, orienting yourself around the sun. So getting up, exposing your eyes to the sun. Like, I feel like sunglasses, what a shame. we got sold the idea at some point that, to be, I think for many people to be afraid of the sun, and if you're going to wear sunblock, I'd recommend blocking out the entirety of the sun, get zinc oxide or something like that, or just get like a sun hat or a shirt, when we're blocking out just specific frequencies, UVB or UVA, and taking kind of like a supplement form of the sun, and putting different chemicals and such in our skin, and that's pouring into rivers, and then we end up eating that again, all the plastic bottles and the shipping. It's like wild when you unpack the whole history of when we're kind of become dependent on products to keep us alive, essentially. But the first thing would be, I think, just creating a healthy relationship with the sun would be a big thing. Like maybe you have the idea that the sun is like some abusive step parent, and coming back and being like, man, like, thank you, son. Wake up every day and and then that comes into gratitude. Thank you, son. Like, thank you, body. Thank you, breath. All of that. There's a whole plethora of research that you've brought up throughout the years on this podcast. It affects your physiology. It affects your mental emotional state. Affects the blood pressure. Affects all of the parts of you. If you can start the day from that place of just a abbreviated observation of taking a moment of reflection of gratitude for the morning. And I think a great place to be that is literally just having gratitude for the sun, how good it feels on your skin.
Yeah. It's so simple, if you think about it, it's the sun that has enabled us to have life in this expression here on planet Earth, right? Yeah. But then it also kill you, it's just like this strange pendulum swing is taking place. And so in reality, yeah, the sun can harm you, but we're talking about a fraction of a percent of people who this actually happens to.
Yeah.
And it's been used as an accreditation for us to not get adequate sunlight, which we literally need. When you mention like our body is eating it, like it's num-nums. Like it's literally one of the most healing substances and regenerative substances because we did a masterclass on vitamin D, and I actually walked people through like, how does your body do the thing? And it's really remarkable. It's like a deep, intimate relationship. Again, like we would not have life here without this sun that we are so afraid of in our culture. As we've just been inundated with things to fear. And this isn't about not having a rational, like if you're Jim Gaffigan complexion, like you're not just going to go out and spend 2 hours at the beach,
sure,
just stark naked. Like that might not be a good idea.
Yeah.
But it's starting to acclimate yourself again and understand like you evolve. Your genes literally expect you to interact with the light from that big ball of fire.
Yeah.
And when you pull away from that, your expression, that physical expression, is going to degrade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Think of it as like a hermetic stressor. And if you work out at the gym, for a while there was a belief that I think it was past age 40, maybe. I don't remember the specific age it was, but it was like you wanted to sustain and just hold on to your joints and your muscles, and too much workout and fitness and all that was it's going to be like you're going to wear yourself out. You're just like, that's not the way the body works. The body responds to come back stronger and healthier and more well circulated and a more robust organism through hermetic stressors throughout the day. So when you work out, it creates inflammation and oxidization, and it's like wow, it's like war inside of the muscles. Then you sleep and you rest and you drink and you do all the things. You come back like, I feel fantastic. Like, wow, I'm not like a car.
Right.
That's a car is a complicated system in systems theory. Your biology is a complex system. We thrive on variability. We thrive on like, get it out there, get like, run it, jump it, sun it. You're like, that's sleep it. You're like, that's what we do. And when you start to pull those factors out, the body becomes confused and becomes backed up. It becomes, it's like, I think that men, especially maybe me, like I like to feel like almost like a tool of sorts. Like I like to have a purpose, and so it's like, you're like, put me on the purpose, whatever it is. Cool. We got to hunt, gather, collect that thing. Okay. Somebody threw a Frisbee on the roof. Like somebody needs to get the Frisbee off the roof. I'm like, I got it, and as below, so above, like our cells, that's your cells. So when you take them out and say, someone threw a Frisbee on the roof, you say, maybe like a robot will get it. You just
gone forever.
I'll just sit here and kind of, I'll maybe look into my screen and narrow my vision and expose a little more blue light to my eyeballs. And kind of go into that forward head posture and all those patterns that if you were to look at any animal in nature in that pattern, you would think they were sick or depressed or injured or something. So I mean, that's the unbelievable thing. If like that position, and now it's not phones that are problematic. I think it's that people just crave connection. And if you're not getting, like Alan Watts has used this metaphor of like modern culture is eating the menu and confusing it for the food. So a lot of what we're doing with maybe our fitness, maybe, you could say that from a light perspective. Like we're getting like junk light throughout the day, LEDs and all these kind of like partial, not the full spectrum, like not the real thing. So it's like light kind of, but it's not the good. Mm-hmm. So it leaves our bodies, I think, yearning. There's Jack White has a bit about this. This is getting a little more abstract, but discussing how the switch from analog to digital, he said that leaves people in that similar way, like yearning for more, because the analog, you're getting the full acoustic spectrum. You're getting the full sound. When you go into that digital, it's, I don't know the exact process of what happens, but it like cuts it all up and then recompresses it back together to be a small file to be able to be shared around. And so when we're hearing that, so says, the idea from Jack White, which I think he's kind of a genius, it leaves us with this yearning sensation. So it's like you're listening to it, but it's not that the full instrument or the full vocal, so when we're eating food, similar thing. And so what happens when we take all of these kind of like supplement forms of information, as opposed to getting those whole forms from the acoustic spectrum, from the visual spectrum, from nutritional, from relationships, likely, I know I'm going way out there in the weeds, so, just bear with me, but I would imagine that would potentially lead a person to having some inherent yearning for something more and not knowing exactly what it is. Yeah. Enter, callback, Neo from the Matrix. Mm-hmm. And that's like, it's like there's you can't sleep at night, and you kind of have this like whirling sensation inside, like, like what is that? And I think what that is we want to just be reconnected back to something more. And nature has all of it, and it doesn't need to be weird. You can bring some plants into your house. You can open the window. You get full spectrum light coming through. You can take a walking meeting with your friends, or your business people. Make some eye contact with somebody when you're getting coffee or at a checkout line. Just have that moment of saying, like, I see you. And through seeing someone else, you see yourself.
It's powerful, man. So that aligned morning, this is, of course, is going to be unique to us. But these are just, you've sprinkled in so many different ideas for us to chew on and to utilize. But for you, so that aligned morning is going to kick off with a sunlight, little dabble, a little morsel of some sunlight. Yeah. And then what else? What are we transitioning into from that?
Sunlight, hydration. You throw a little some minerals or something in your water. Throw a little sea salt in there is a nice bonus, just to help actually be able to absorb that water. And then movement is going to be a really important one, which would be in tandem with the sunlight. So you're walking your body out to the sun. Sometimes we need to everyone's different with this. I think if you're just taking a walk, that's fantastic. I'm happy. I'm so grateful and happy about that. But pushing yourself past that first 5 minutes, like most people don't want to do things that are good for them for the first 5 minutes. So being willing to have like resting the inner bitch, is like what David Goggins talks about, and Rogan talks about his own inner bitch a lot. So being able to just work out that muscle of those things that I know are good for me, that I know are going to be rewarding, I know they're going to pay back. I just need to get through that 5 minutes. Commit to 4 minutes of it. So for you, that's taking maybe a little jog. That would be a beautiful thing. If it's maybe swing some kettlebells in the morning, maybe put some music on and just start the process. Wiggle the hips a little bit, maybe get down low a little bit. Whatever works for you. I think meditation is a beautiful thing. Maybe your form of movement is intentional stillness, because that's movement. I did a Vipassana meditation retreat. It was like 10 days where you just essentially just sit and meditate for 10 days. So you get up at, I think 4:30 or 5 a.m. Guy comes around with like a gong, rings the gong, wakes you up. You go and you meditate for an hour. Then you take a little break. Then you meditate for an hour. Then you take a little break. Meditate for. That's just what you do for the duration of the 10 days. And in that it became very evident that stillness is absolutely a viable form of movement, but it's being intentional with that stillness. So most of our stillness is kind of like almost like wasted stillness. Your stillness is like, yeah, and you're just cell phone scrolling, or maybe you're unconsciously just eating Cheetos. You're hunched over into the couch, you're thinking about the girl or thinking about the thing. You're still whirling, right? So then there's another level of stillness where it's like, okay, I'm going to actually start to work with a little bit more internal sovereignty. I'm going to practice honing in the edge of my blade of my consciousness. So anytime one of those thoughts comes in, invite it, say, cool, thanks for being here, and then come back to observing the breath would be one example. Anapanasati is like a Sanskrit way of saying just observing the breath. It's a very common meditation practice. It's great, but you could observe it. You could observe a candle, listen to some music, or just observe the music, and that is a muscle. So that's another beautiful movement practice, I would say, is sharpening that blade of your consciousness through intentional stillness. So both of those are great. Whatever works for you. If you're going to do, just find what works. Like the best nutrition plan, best exercise plan, best morning routine, you already know what I'm about to say. It's the one that you'll do. Like, I don't care what you do. Just do something that lights you up. So if jogging sounds just like, not into that, like, don't do that. Like, do the thing that actually makes you enjoy this human experience. That's the key to longevity. Like, we're trying to inject in ourselves different supplements or eating pharmaceutical stuff in order to like allow our cells to become less senescent or lengthen our telomeres or whatever. It's like, come on. Like, if you don't want to be here, what's the point of longevity? And so coming back and making that be a foundation of the way that you move, the way that you think, the way that you live, the way that you relate, like, that is health. That's a great morning routine.
Facts. I love it, man. Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, thealignbook.com.
Correct.
To pick up the Align Method. Of course, anywhere books are sold as well.
Yeah.
But again, you'll have some bonuses for folks over there. And I highly recommend. This is one of those books that, it's the simplicity and the effectiveness. I'm a big fan of effectiveness, and so adding this to your library, taking some of these tools, adding it to your repertoire. And like I said, at the very beginning of this, you're somebody who just this one nugget is implemented in my life repeatedly. It's something I would occasionally do, but then the way that you described it, it turned on another switch in my mind to make it more consistent. And then you see the rewards in life as well.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that so much, man. Can you let everybody know where they can follow you, get more information, and all that good stuff?
Yeah. I mean, most people probably just go to Instagram, so that's Align Podcast. And then there's the Align Podcast. They go back and listen to the Bruce Lepton episode. It'd be an interesting one, or they could listen to the last one that I did with Shawn. I thought was actually one of my preferred episodes, so that would be a good one to go back to. And yeah, I mean, I think that's from there, it goes into the annals of all of the different exercises and training programs and all that stuff. But I think that the book is, the promise of the book would be that upon reading it, one, you can open it up to any page and you'll get value from it that you can implement into your life right now. And so the promise upon going through any, if you read 15 pages of the book, it will start to open up your lens to be able to leverage literally any moment throughout the day. You're just covered with opportunities to get better. We just, for the most part, you need to have the eyes to see it. So that's the structure and function of anything that I do, is helping provide simplistic, tangible information to start to augment the way that we perceive our moment-to-moment life, so that literally every moment becomes an opportunity. That's the whole point.
What if I told you these are diseases of skeletal muscle first? And that obesity, diabetes, heart disease, cardiovascular disease begin in skeletal muscle first. Insulin resistance begins in skeletal muscle first. And if we care about root cause medicine, then we have to care about skeletal muscle.